Figuring out who is right and wrong between Israel and Palestine is not complicated. Palestine is right, Israel is wrong. Welcome back to Deprogramming Propaganda, where I take a closer look at propaganda that specifically used to work on me in hopes that it can stop working on me and maybe stop working on you as well. Today we're looking at the phrase, "it's complicated." And no, it's not in reference to relationships. While people on the right often just say we should support Israel absolutely, a lot of people who consider themselves liberal often just use the party line, "it's complicated." I'll tell you right now that that was my response for years and years. Whenever someone brought up Israel and Palestine, my first thought was, it's too complicated, let's not get into that. The interesting thing about that is that I never tried and then failed to look into it and decided that it was too complicated for me to understand. I was told by other people that it was too complicated to understand and that I shouldn't bother looking into it, so I didn't. That is, until it became too big an issue for me to ignore. When I was finally forced to look into it, it turns out it's not very complicated at all. Israel was specifically founded as a settler colonial project. This means Israel's very existence is predicated on violence. Specifically, violence towards the people who are already living there, aka the Palestinians. The initial violence of founding Israel has led to 75 years of consistent violence against Palestinians. Now, I know many of you are going to be quick to point out that Palestinians have committed violence during that 75-year span as well. But it has always been within the context of fighting back against the Israeli occupation of their home. Am I willing to condone every single act of violence that Palestinians have committed in order to fight back against Israeli oppression? No. However, I can't condemn any of it either. You are not able to morally condemn violent resistance in the face of violent oppression. The only way that we can condemn Palestinian violence is if Israeli violence comes to an end and then they keep committing violence. Until then, we cannot condemn those who are resisting oppression, because if you are in the same situation, you may be doing the same things. You cannot convict someone of a crime they have not committed yet. Two things have to happen before you can condemn any Palestinian violence. The first is ceasefire, and the second is land back. When you guarantee Palestinians the right to exist in their ancestral homes and they continue to commit violence, then we can start condemning them. But something tells me that they are going to stop fighting once they've won what they've been fighting for. But that leads me to what is sort of different about this episode of Deprogramming Propaganda. Given all of your responses to my previous videos, I have a pretty good feeling that most of you agree with everything I've said so far, or at least the grand majority of it. You agree that the phrase "it's complicated" doesn't apply. Once you've seen the apartheid walls, the lines of men stripped down to their underwear sitting on frozen concrete, and the bodies of NICU babies decaying in their hospital beds, it's pretty easy to see this as fairly simple, fairly black and white, and fairly not complicated. So who is still using that phrase, and why? Well, if you are looking for experts at sidestepping atrocities, you can look no further than liberals. Over and over and over again, the people who are still trying to convince us to vote for Joe Biden are using this phrase to sidestep the entire genocide to get us to talk about what? Increased infrastructure spending? As if a few roads getting repaired outweighs being actively genocidal. But here's the thing. They know they can't make that argument because they know that argument sounds insane. They can't say the phrase, "ignore that genocide, I want to build another oil pipeline," which is another tactic of genocide against Native Americans. Instead, whenever they are pressed to talk about Palestine, all they say is, "it's complicated," so they can ignore the topic completely and move on to all the good Joe Biden is doing. They are asking us to ignore our complicity in genocide so that you can get what? Faster internet speeds? They are trying to convince us that that is a legitimate trade-off. Or are they? Because again, that sounds insane. I don't think everyone who is still voting for Biden is insane. I think they are in denial. I think they think the only way that they can be politically engaged is voting in an election every 4 years. I think that they think there is no way that we can actually pick our own candidates. I think they think we are all slaves to the whims of the ruling class. I think that they know supporting Israel is a morally indefensible position. But because they feel so scared and so hopeless about the prospect of actually being able to create real change, they have to shut their eyes, they have to shut their ears, and they have to pretend it's not happening. They've been on this app too. They've witnessed all of the things that we have witnessed to understand that this is not a complicated conflict. However, they have to tell themselves that it is. They have to pretend like there are extenuating circumstances out there somewhere that justify all of this. Even if they have not seen them, even if they can't prove their existence, they have to believe that. Otherwise, they know how morally reprehensible they are. So next time you hear someone using the phrase, "it's complicated," understand they are not trying to convince you. They are trying to convince themselves. They are trying to continue to convince themselves that Biden is worth supporting, even as the reality keeps coming back to tell them no, he is not. And the only way that we can break through that wall of denial is by continually forcing them to have to address reality. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like my work and want to support it, check out my Patreon through the link tree in my profile. Also, thank you to my Patreon supporters, Andrew and Steven, for all of your support.